We are live. It's the No Morning Show. It's just about 19 minutes after the hour of 6 o'clock. And we're speaking to TTUTA Tobago representative, Mr. Brandon Roberts, who is an educator as well. Good morning to you, Mr. Roberts.
Good morning, Ms. Legal, and good morning to the viewers.
Say Natalee, because you're spoiling my last name. So just say Natalee.
Good morning, Natalie.
So I just wanted to see if we could catch up on what's happening in Tobago. We know some of the children are back out to school. How has that been going?
Well, the first week of school, we have that usual slow turnout. The first day I would have been out visiting. So we wouldn't have a full turnout at that interval. And we also know the concern with the COVID cases as well as the protocols at schools. So slowly but surely, students started getting back out. However, the concerns that would have been lingering still exist.
Are we still having Forms 4 to 6 students who aren't back in the classrooms as yet?
Well, those students who decide to not come out, but the government would have made it available for all persons, vaccinated or unvaccinated, to come out to school. So yes, there are some parents who are still hesitant. There are some students who are still hesitant, where we don't have 100%, but majority of the students who are eligible are coming out to the schools.
So since the government has chosen to, reopen schools for those in Forms 4 to 6, what happens to those children? Do they get packages, or is it that since they've chosen not to return to the physical plants that they're not being educated at this time?
From what I've seen in the guidelines give some of give schools that leeway to have alternate ways of delivery. I interacting with the secondary schools, they have had a system where they utilize both face-to-face and online. It is something that TTUTA would have initially been against, and we mean to be against, because there seems to be a flip-flop between virtual and face-to-face where we don't have set planning. We believe in quality delivery and not one that would just result in a situation arise where you go to virtual. So I know that there are some teachers who are still trying to incorporate virtual for those who are at home while also doing physical engagement.
Okay, so it's that while you're having that period, let's say it's a math period, that the teacher will have to have a device and set up Zoom so that whomever isn't in the classroom would still be able to benefit from what's going on.
Well, I have not heard of those scenarios. I heard of those scenarios when we had only vaccinated persons coming out. However, there are some classes that are not done face-to-face to accommodate everybody online based on my interaction. So it's not where it is happening at the same time, but not all classes are forced to be had face-to-face.
Now, we know that there are plans by the government to introduce a quasi-safe zone for public sector workers. How do you think this is going to impact teachers and the amount of teachers we have in the system in Tobago?
Actually, I believe the safe zone is being misused. I don't believe vaccines make the environment safe. I believe in the vaccines in terms of yourself having the ability to not utilize space at the hospital and probably most for your survival. But schools need to have the safety protocols put in place where the environment is actually safe and spread is actually minimized. If we look at countries that have done well in terms of vaccination and still have high cases, what we need to treat with is the prevention of spread. And we would have had infrastructural issues for years. So we are not even at the level where we are supposed to be. And then we have COVID protocols to treat with. So we are having a situation where we are making do to the best as we can, but it's nowhere near ideal nor comforting for those who have to come out. So there is the concern of some parents about not sending out students. That's why I'm here on the ground. We know the numbers in Tobago in terms of vaccination is low. So that may also be an impact as to how many persons actually come out when they are further reopening.
Right. So if you're saying that you don't believe that the vaccines can keep us safe, the reality is that we've seen that the press conferences, we've had quite a bit of them by now. And Dr. Avery Hines told us that you're 15.6 times more likely to die from COVID if you are unvaccinated. I mean, the statistics speak for itself. It doesn't mean, and I think even from day one, we were being told that it won't stop the contraction or transmission of the COVID-19 virus, but you don't believe it makes a difference at all?
Yes, so I just want to clarify that. I do believe that the vaccine is beneficial to the human being. It does not make the environment, as I clarified. It does not
Okay.
make, we use safe zone as once you're vaccinated, the zone is safe. That's the intended interpretation. However, the protocols, what my focus is not so much on the vaccine. The protocols need to be in place to prevent spread as best as possible. So that's where my real focus is.
Okay, thanks for the clarity. I perfectly understand what you're saying now. So, what if the protocols in place in schools? Are they insufficient, and if so, how?
All right. So first of all, the tracking system in terms of persons who may be positive, persons of concern, it's nowhere near comfortable. We would have had last term where schools would have been called to shut down and sanitize, where the person in question would have been in school the last time over a week ago. So timely feedback, first of all, is not there. There's a confusion now with teachers and principals in terms of listing who are primary contacts, trying to remember who you would have been in contact with a week, close to 2 weeks ago. So especially that particular aspect needs to be improved. We have the situation at the entry protocol. We have the MTS staff who is somewhat managing that. Secondary schools have the benefit of safety officers. Primary schools don't. So when primary schools open, that will be another issue that the education division would have to get around. But the entry protocol does not truly capture those persons who may be positive. We have this quick test with the number of persons coming out. It's a quick scan and you go your way. I would have gone to secondary schools where they don't even have me go through the protocols and I test them to see how much I'm asked to do the washing of the hands and so forth. So those entry protocols need to be tightened up and it's more about adherence. Within the classrooms now, we have situations where we have been maneuvering around shortcomings for some time. Now we can't be maneuvering through shortcomings and then adhere to the protocols. So we are behind the ball and some distance at that.
Well, when you say you're maneuvering shortcomings, what are some of those shortcomings?
All right, so if we look at that labs, teachers have not had use of labs for years, the science labs. So teachers would have been engaged in some practices, which I would have advised. If something is to happen while performing these practices that are not the correct practices, you would have questions to answer. However, we do care about our students. So outside of the labs, teachers are doing their best to have the lab work done. Some of those things would have that congregation where you don't have the proper spacing, you have the proper equipment. So students are engaged in a particular way that is not to the liking of the protocols as they have written. Beside that, we have furniture shortage, we have furniture issues at the schools. Fortunately, I heard at least one school received about 400 plus tables yesterday. So there are that furniture shortage where you don't have persons actually distance enough where the furniture is not the ideal furniture. Actually, in some secondary schools, we have that long bench that is used in the primary school. I know that Scarborough Secondary is one such school. So some of these things need to be treated with. In terms of the number of cleaners, we don't have sufficient cleaners at school. So what you have is a quick wipe and go. So there's that discomfort of the students and teachers where even some teachers and students are asked to do some of the cleaning themselves.
So things definitely need some improvement. But you know, you mentioned distance just now. I know that most classrooms are normally about, I don't know, 20 to 30 students. And with the space of a classroom, are we able to maintain that 6 feet distance between each other that's recommended?
Well, the good thing that's in the makeup of some of the schools, there are some of the rooms where you can open the blinds and extend the size of the classroom. Some of the classrooms don't have that ability. However, schools have maneuvered as to how they would spread out. So I know that in the current situation, some of the schools utilize forms 1, 2, 3, even for the form 4 to 6. So the classrooms of throughout the school is used to spread out those students.
Right. But even if you do that, when you have one teacher teaching a class and if they're spread, how do you treat with that if you have some students in another classroom but with just one teacher to treat with all the students? Or are we employing teachers to so that when we split the classrooms, we can have two people teaching? How does it work
Right.
really?
Right. So foreseeing that challenge, the ministry would have given schools some leeway. So that's why some schools still have some subject areas do their lessons online. Um, and as I said before, there is some room where it can be opened out to extend. The substitute system should be in place. However, it has been struggling in Trinidad for some time, and it's frankly non-existent in Tobago. So in terms of having a temporary teacher or substitute teacher come on stream, that has been a challenge as well. Well, throughout Trinidad and well non-existent in Tobago.
So when the forms 1 to 3 students come back out, how are we going to maneuver the social distancing?
It is going to be challenging. It's not something that TTUTA would have recommended for us to go at this time. We are actually seeing where the vaccine conversation has taken over actual treating with infrastructural issues. If the infrastructural issues are treated with, there will be greater comfort in maneuvering some of these things. If staffing issues are treated with, there will be greater ability to maneuver through these things, but we are not so much treating with those. We are focusing on other things.
Has Tutor Tobago have an opportunity to meet with the Secretary of Education as yet?
Yes, we have had 2 meetings. The first introductory meeting where we would have had some of these broad issues. I would have seen where the secretaries would have scheduled further meetings to discuss, in particular, the further reopenings in Tobago. We would have also been, TTUTA would have also been representing Tobago concerns at ministry meetings and meetings with the minister. We also have the APS president, the Principals Association for Secondary Schools, who is also at a school in Tobago, who brings that Tobago perspective to ministry meetings where the policy positions are had.
Okay, so then we can expect, you're definitely having meetings, which to me is excellent. So you can expect some collaborative effort to deal with these issues.
The only where the optimism isn't there is that we are seeing much talk, but we are seeing little action. The challenge with schools, we have had this no money
Oh God,
syndrome
Mr.
for a
Mr.
very long
Roberts, the
time.
people them not even in office 2 months yet. Give them little time to catch themselves, no man.
Well, yes, I will have to operate within that reason. However, time is not there waiting. We have exams coming up. So yes, we have that relation. I have committed to working with them. So we have had that kind of engagement already. But time will be of essence and is the action. So when I talk about there has been much talk, I'm talking nationally. In terms of the new secretaries, yes, there is a promise, but time, as I would have said before, is of essence.
All right, well, I look forward to those talks and more importantly, action so that we can get those infrastructural issues and teacher shortages sorted out. But in terms of the shortages of teachers, who do you speak with about that? Is that the secretary or is it the Teaching Service Commission?
Well, thank you. It's both. Actually, cabinet has a role to play. We would have treated secondary schools in Tobago as either the bastard child or a bastard system, where we have increased the offerings at secondary schools, but we have not done anything at cabinet to increase the establishment. Now, the establishment dictates how many positions a secondary school or primary school would have. We have increased the offering, so we have several subject areas where we don't have a teacher. Because of the devolved function where the teacher has its powers, they have seek to employ contract teachers, which has now become a significant problem. Contract teachers cannot take up positions in terms of middle management, HOD position, head of department, dean positions. They can act as vice principals or principals. So we have a significant shortage in terms of HOD positions, those middle management positions. When also we find a teacher to act up who is within the service, who do we replace that teacher with? So we cannot continue along the line of contract teachers, which is a disadvantage to those teachers who have that sort of engagement. There are several recommendations sent to TSC. Teaching Service Commission, sorry. I do not believe that Tobago is getting the kind of attention it ought to get. I see they put out newsletters of numbers of approvals and so forth. We are not feeling it in Tobago. Fortunately, the Teaching Service Commission would have reached out to have a meeting. I believe that meeting is next week, for us to discuss some of these matters. TTUTA would have written twice last year, and we had a meeting with them early last year, but we are yet to see some fruit out of those engagements.
Well, let's hope that that meeting comes off, but more importantly, that you'll get some kind of positive action out of the meeting. But Mr. Roberts, thank you so much for speaking with us this morning.
And thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. Brandon Roberts there, tutor officer in Tobago. They're just talking about some of the issues they're still having. Not surprised. He says that I think I really accept and understand the point he was making about the vaccine. He says the vaccine for the person, for the human is great. But is that unless you deal with the protocols, especially with schools, with students, you're still going to have transmission, you're still going to have spread. And I think that's what I think they're trying to say. We need to treat with that.
And if I remember correctly, earlier this week, that was another complaint that somebody brought up is making sure that they have enough things to be able to sanitize the schools as frequently as they would need to, especially when you have children back out.
That's when I spoke to TTUTA last week, President, and she spoke about the same thing about just having these things in place, because as he's saying, the entry requirements that, you need some kind of improvement there as well. But let's hope. He says the new Secretary of Education has met with them, but I don't know if she got the 400 plus desks that they have, but I mean, if it's so, that would be fantastic.